Hello everyone, my name is Oğuz Kaplan. I welcome you all to our virtual conference paper presentation. Our topic is an improved bidirectional generative adversarial networks-based approach for anomaly detection. The outline of this presentation is as follows. First, I will give you a brief introduction and talk about the literature review. Afterwards, I will touch on the methods used in the study and concluding remarks. Anomalies are data patterns which do not comply with a clear concept of normal data behavior. The unexpected manners whose pattern is significantly different from other observations are named as anomalous observations. Anomaly detection has been an active research area for several decades in a large number of key domains such as risk management, compliance, security, financial surveillance, health and medical risk, and AI safety, etc. Although anomaly detection is an active research area for years, there are still a number of challenges. In many cases, anomalous observations and normal data are not separable accurately. Anomalous actions are tried to conform to normal data behavior. Due to the transformation in many businesses, the concept of anomalous observations keeps on changing. Acquiring labeled data for training and test sets sufficiently is another main difficulty. It's called unlabeled data problem. Data noise makes the process of distinguishing normal data from anomalous data more difficult, an imbalance class problem. The overview of this study is as follows. We used KDD CUP 9910% dataset and we used one class support vector machine as a baseline method. We used bidirectional generative adversarial networks as a one class approach to overcome class imbalance problem. We aim to improve the performance of bidirectional generative adversarial networks on anomaly detection tasks. In this regard, we applied two different training structures for bidirectional generative adversarial networks. In this study, we mainly aimed to improve the bidirectional generative adversarial network's performance on the anomaly detection tasks. To do so, we applied different training methodologies to bidirectional generative adversarial networks. We also aimed to reduce the dependency between begun components in training phase. The three items above serve as a purpose of generating accurately separable anomaly scores. Anomaly detection has been the topic of numerous research and studies. Anomaly detection approaches are mentioned in 5 main streams. These are proximity-based algorithms, clustering-based algorithms, tree-based algorithms, kernel-based algorithms, and deep approaches for anomaly detection. This study fully focused on deep anomaly detection approaches and used big structure on anomaly detection tasks. With the advent of neural networks, autoencoders, variational autoencoders, generative adversarial networks are widely used thanks to their training architecture. Mainly, reconstruction loss is used as anomaly scores. So obtaining the representation of normal data distribution enables us to generate normal-like data and similarly enables us to detect data from a different distribution. Because of the class imbalance problem, unsupervised models perform better compared to conventional supervised machine learning algorithms. The main motivation behind this study is as follows. There is a dependency between the impact of the generator and the discriminator's weights. This is because the backpropagation for the generator flows back to the discriminator, and this training structure makes learning process deeper and harder in terms of the generator. So our contribution is as follows. We propose two different training architecture for BGAN to improve the performance on anomaly detection tasks. Discogun and DualGAN, similar to our study, propose additional loss terms aiming to improve the reconstruction quality of the generator in computer vision tasks. And these two approaches dissociated from us in terms of the model architecture and the reconstruction loss and the domain. In this study, we used BGAN. BGAN is an extended version of generative adversarial networks. Generative adversarial networks are neural network architectures that consist of generator and a discriminator part. To show you the architecture and detailed visualization of generative adversarial networks, I'll continue to the next slide. This slide shows us the loss function and the architecture of generative adversarial networks. The generator's objective is to generate real-life data samples, and the discriminator's objective is to distinguish real ones from generated samples. This architecture designed as a two-player minimax games, and discriminator and the generator are trained simultaneously. There are some problems anyone may encounter while training generative adversarial networks. The most frequent problem is mode collapse. The mode collapse problem arises when the discriminator is stuck in the local minima and the generator keeps reproducing the same output since the discriminator fooled easily by the mode generated by the generator. And the other problem is the vanishing gradient problem. During big propagation, the chain rule of differentiation is utilized. The gradient gets smaller while flowing to the first layer and sometimes becomes so small that the preliminary layers can stop the learning process. In the literature, rectified linear units and leaky rectified linear units activation functions are proposed to prevent the vanishing gradient problem. And there are also different losses to prevent the problems mentioned above. Those losses are Wasserstein, least squares, loss sensitive, and energy based losses. But those losses are out of scope of this study. This slide shows us the loss function and the architecture of bidirectional generative adversarial networks. BIGAN is an extended version of generative adversarial networks that adds the encoder part, which maps the input into a latent space. The encoder is also a deep neural network, generally structured as the inverse of the generator. Differing from the standard generative adversarial networks, in bidirectional generative adversarial networks, discriminator takes not only the input but also the latent representation of the input into account. In our proposed method 1 for bidirectional generative adversarial networks training, we added extra training step for generator independent from discriminator, which updates only the generator's parameters by calculating the loss between the input of encoder and output of generator at the end of each epoch. We updated the generator's parameters by taking the mean squared error between the real sample x and the g of z, which is the generated sample. On the left side of the slide, the standard BIGAN algorithm is illustrated, and on the right side, the modified training architecture of BIGAN is illustrated. We highlighted the difference with red rectangle. On our proposed method 2 for BIGAN training, in addition to the proposed method 1, we trained the generator component beforehand according to the equation 3.6, which is the mean square error between the real samples and the generated samples. We feed BIGAN with the pre-trained generator for simultaneous learning of the generator, the discriminator, and the encoder. In this slide, red rectangle shows the modifications applied to the standard BIGAN algorithm, which is illustrated on the left side of the slide. Our ultimate purpose is to generate anomaly scores for the observations. The equation 3.3 shows how the anomaly score is calculated. To calculate anomaly score, we applied the same approach as the efficient gun-based anomaly detection paper. Equation 3.3 has two components. These are LG of x and LG of x. The anomaly score is calculated with residual loss of encoder and generator's output and added to the discriminator's loss. To compare the algorithm's performance on a test set, we determined model evaluation metrics as precision, recall, F1 score, and accuracy. In this study, we used KGD Type 9910% dataset. This dataset is created for building machine learning models to detect network intrusions. It provides us with the labeled observations according to attack types. It has continuous and categorical features. We selected some attack types to create class imbalance problem. In the final dataset, normal observations constitute to 99% of whole dataset. As a pre-processing step, we implemented test score normalization and rescaled the features so that they will have the properties of a standard normal distribution with 0 mean and 1 variance. Since we have categorical features, we applied one-hot encoding and encoded categorical features as a one-hot numerical vectors. We splitted our dataset into a train, test, and validation set. Test, train, and validation set do not include any common observations. We used validation set to determine the best score threshold for each algorithm to classify the observations on the test set. In this study, we converted the process of anomaly detection tasks to a one-class classification task and trained the algorithms using only normal data. Each algorithm generates an anomaly score for each observations and conducts the detection process by considering the anomaly scores. We use the validation set to determine the best anomaly score threshold. After generating a set of scores with each algorithm for the validation set, we determined the best score threshold as the anomaly score, giving the best F1 score by conducting an exhaustive search. This process was conducted for each algorithm, and we obtained different thresholds for each approach. We classified the observations according to the thresholds of each algorithm. On the test set, observations greater than the corresponding thresholds were labeled as an anomaly for the corresponding algorithm. Our proposed three methods improved the performance of BigAN, and one class support vector machine gave the best precision score with low recall. When we pulled the recall of one class support vector machine to 98% by changing the threshold, we noted that the precision of one class support vector machine decreased dramatically to 65%, implying that the score generated by the one class support vector machine are not heterogeneous as the anomaly score generated by the BigAN-like approaches. Our first proposed method, method 1, achieved an acceptable improvement when compared to BigAN. Our second proposed method, method 2, made a drastic progress in the performance of BigAN, giving the best F1 score among other methods. In this study, we considered the network intrusion detection task as anomaly detection tasks. We applied GAN-based approach, discussing the problem as one class problem. We implemented two different training architecture for BigAN. In this study, we added the mean square error term to generator's training process. In method 1, we additionally updated the generator at the end of each epoch. In method 2, we pre-trained and updated the generator at the end of each epoch. According to our findings, we increased the performance of BigAN on intrusion detection by changing the training architecture and adding extra training stuff for only updating the generated parameters. Starting BigAN training with a pre-trained generator as in method 2 contributed to the performance of BigAN the most, since we initialized the parameters of BigAN's generator components by training the generators on the training data beforehand. We concluded from our experiments that BigAN for anomaly detection setup is affected positively in terms of the performance on the test set when it's trained with our proposed approaches. We left an open point to analyze how proposed approaches result on the high-dimensional feature sets. There are different loss terms introduced for increasing the performance of GANs. They are mainly conducted on computer vision tasks. Applying approach presented in this study on the BigAN version of corresponding GANs architecture, such as Adversarial GANs, least square GANs, loss sensitive GANs, is another feature research direction. Our approach only considers all types of attacks as an anomaly and does not classify them according to their type. In the future works, these methods can be studied to handle multi-class anomaly detection tasks. This is the end of our virtual conference paper presentation, and thank you for listening and for your attention.